right. Hello, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started in just a minute or two. But once again, thank you for joining and inviting us to present. I'm Coleman Wagoner. I'm a principal solutions engineer at Tableau. So I support really the technical side of our products and just really help support adoption within our accounts in higher education. Been at Tableau for 12 years now, so certainly worked with a lot of customers over the years. I'm here with Adam Breen. He's the sales account manager for all things ASU. We'll be at the toolbar as well. If you have direct questions to us, we certainly will be around the next day or two. So overall, looking forward to jumping into the session. I think we're good to go on the Zoom. All right. So let's go ahead and dive in. Once again, I'm Coleman. I work on the technical side of the products. I've been at Tableau for 12 years. And one of the things that I really like about Tableau is we're just constantly releasing new features, new innovations, really to help all of you do more with data faster. And so certainly as we add new features and new products even, certainly it's something that I get to do is learn a lot of these new technologies, new features, and then communicate to my customers how they might use them. So that's really what I had planned for today in terms of a session, is going beyond the basics of building a dashboard, but really focusing on what are some of those innovative features that you can take advantage of in your analytics experience. Now, I'm aware that every institution is kind of different in terms of their cadence and frequency of upgrading Tableau server and making our features available. So I did want to highlight that some of these features that I'll present, they are released, but they might be something you may choose to wait a little bit until your actual Tableau server is upgraded to some of the latest releases. So let's go ahead and dive in. If I can advance the slide. As you can see, I kind of went with more of an action-packed agenda. We'll do it a little more fast paced. I know it's after lunch, but these are some of the kind of feature areas that I wanted to focus on for the presentation today. And rather than really talking about features released version by version, I tried to organize some of our capabilities and our features into some of these kind of core topic feature areas. So I like to actually, Mike mentioned the keynote that every company has a mission statement, but I actually like to start with ours, which is really focused on people. We believe that people are your greatest asset, and that putting data into their hands in a meaningful way that just empowers them to ask and answer questions with data, and really using data for effective decision making is really important. So our mission is to help people see and understand data. It's really the 7 words that have driven Tableau as a product and as a company over all the years. And I would say that our mission and our innovation just continues to accelerate as part of Salesforce. So many of you may know that Tableau Salesforce about 4 years ago. And as you can imagine, in 2019, after acquiring Tableau, the first kind of set of features would be Salesforce looking at all the various technologies that they have and thinking about what are some of the ways that we can integrate Tableau with some of the technology at Salesforce. So that's the first kind of feature area innovation that I wanted to highlight, is around Salesforce integration. So first is the concept called the Lightning Web Component. Am I holding this right? I feel like it's cutting out. Is it battery? It's just moving. All right, I'll try to stand still while I talk. So once again, the Tableau Viz Lightning Web Component is about embedding Tableau visualizations directly into Salesforce. So many of our customers, they're very much standardized on Salesforce as a platform. Certainly it has a lot of data, valuable data in it. And so getting that Tableau analytics insight directly in the flow of work for that Salesforce user, we wanted to be able to make it easier to embed Tableau dashboards into Salesforce. So that's the Tableau Viz Lightning Web Component. It is a free application that you can install from the App Exchange. Another area of focus for Salesforce is certainly AI. They're really strong in their Einstein AI capabilities. It made sense to think about ways that Tableau can integrate with Einstein AI, everything like predictive analytics, and how their Einstein AI goes into things like prescriptive analytics, not just what might likely happen, a student outcome, predicting a certain student outcome, but saying what are some of the fields that we have some level of control over that can potentially impact the quality of that outcome. So that's bringing in Einstein Discovery and Tableau. There's a couple Salesforce was doing it. The first one was a Einstein Discovery dashboard extension. Basically, think of it as a little widget you bring into a Tableau that you're passing data from the Tableau dashboard through to Einstein and basically scoring a predictive value back in Tableau. We also introduced Einstein prediction scoring in Tableau Prep Builder as well. So a couple different ways that we're taking Salesforce Einstein AI and bringing it into Tableau. Feature around Salesforce and Tableau is around connectivity, right? Obviously, there's lots of valuable data in Salesforce. Tableau has a connector into Salesforce, but they're really reimagining ways to leverage Salesforce data. The first one is what's called Salesforce Data Cloud. Newer technology, really, it's more like an active data lake architecture. So rather than all the companies in the world ETLing data out of Salesforce into their data warehouse, letting Salesforce can maintain control over that data, but having more of a real-time ability to query that data directly from. So lots of great technology innovation around Tableau and Salesforce. Another one that's kind of useful is what's called external actions. Once again, it's all about being able to take data from a Tableau dashboard and take action and do something with it. So being able to take data values and then run it into what's called Flow Builder for Salesforce. So you can maybe select a piece of data in Tableau and update records in Salesforce based on that selection. So overall, focus around the integration between Salesforce and Tableau. Now, in this room, certainly not everybody is a Salesforce user, but that's been a big focus area of Tableau over the last couple of years. But there's a lot of great features for the core Tableau user, which we consider like our analysts or our creators, our desktop users. Now, I didn't want to talk so much about dashboards, but there's some really great features that have come in terms of dashboard interactivity. So raise your hand if you've ever used a parameter in Tableau. Okay, so pretty much everybody, right? It's that ability to allow for a user to put data or provide an input. Now, historically, those parameters have always been pretty static, right? When you publish a dashboard with a parameter, that default value is the value of the parameter when you publish it. But what the dynamic parameters feature does is allows you to use things like a calculation, right? I want to be able to get the max date in my data set and have that value be the default value of my parameter. So that's a great way to make sure that, maybe I have a calculation knowing that my data updated up until yesterday, that every time that parameter runs, it's always going to get yesterday's date, such that the logic of that yesterday value can be passed in all of your logic in your calculation. So dynamic parameters, really useful. It came out a while ago, but this was the #1 requested feature on our ideas forum for probably 10 plus years. And so that was really exciting, is the concept of a dynamic parameter. Next feature area is parameter actions. So hopefully everybody, if you're a desktop user, there's different types of actions in Tableau. The most common is the filter action, right? I click on a piece of data in a dashboard and it filters the other viz elements in my dashboard. What a parameter action does, it allows a user to select a data point and essentially capture that data point that you selected into a parameter that, once again, drives all of your logic. And so when I get through the slides, I'll have time to do a quick demo of an example of a parameter action. The next one is set actions. So parameter action, single select of a data point. A set action is a way to collect many data points and store it in essentially a container or a field that might have many different data points in it. And then you can use those in calculations as well. The last dashboard interactivity feature that I really like is you really only have a certain amount of screen real estate on a dashboard. So dashboard or dynamic zone visibility is a way to essentially show and hide certain elements of a dashboard based off of a user selection or based off of a parameter. So lots of great features around dashboard interactivity. Next, kind of some miscellaneous items around visual analytics. Image role is a really interesting feature. You can imagine that maybe you're looking at a station. In this case, you see that I have states. So being able to have an image associated to a data value based on if I have a hosted image via URL. So you might be doing a dashboard that looks at peer institutions. So maybe you have logos of various peer institutions, and instead of just the listed a peer institution, you could do a logo. Or maybe you're in a department where you're tracking activity of team members, and instead of having the team member's name, you want the team member's hosted profile picture in whatever application. So lots of interesting ways of just that visual element of an image via URL, instead of doing what historically in Tableau was like creating a shape and storing a shape and then manually assigning shapes. Is a much easier way to do it. Next, line patterns was just introduced. So instead of differentiating lines just based on color, you can now do things like dashed lines, dotted lines. So it's great for things where doing like actual value versus like a budget or predicted value. So maybe you're getting that data point, but maybe you want to have it be a dashed line because it's not a true actual data, it's an estimated data point. And for differentiate something other than color. Other features, proper function. I hate string manipulation functions, left, right, mid, all the various characters. So this was a pretty, useful feature for, taking data that may not be perfectly clean and putting it into proper case very quickly and easily. Dynamic axes titles. A lot of my customers, maybe raise your hand if you've done it. You have a parameter that allows you to toggle between enrollment and number of total applicants, and you have one parameter that drives the measure based off of a parameter swap. I see it all the time. And so what dynamic axes titles does is basically allow you to replace the value of the name of the title and the axes based off of the measure that you select in your parameter. Last one, replace data source per sheet. So for a long time, Tableau's always had a data source swap. Basically say, oh, I have a dashboard that maybe I pulled that has data from last month's export from some system. And then I got my new month's worth of data. We've always had that ability to swap the data source from month 1 to month 2, but being able to do that per sheet gives you a little more control over what's being swapped in the dashboard there. All right. The next feature area that I want to introduce is around mapping. I'm a big mapping user of Tableau. When I started at Tableau, we didn't even have the filled maps, right? The ability to fill a state in the boundary of that state. So we've had a lot of capabilities in this area. One is the concept of spatial functions. Spatial functions are really powerful. Some of the most common ones are things like I want to do a buffer, right? I want to have a data point on my map, and I want to basically have a visual indicator of what 5 miles around the radius of a centralized point. So that's something like a buffer function. Next is multiple map layers, right? So oftentimes you're working spatial objects, right? If you look at this map here, this is a college campus. It has a spatial file about building footprints. And then we also layered on bus routes and planned bike projects and bus stops. And so being able to add different geospatial objects and layer them onto a dashboard is something that's much easier to do than previous versions of Tableau. All right. Going into some other new features that are really cool that I'll show in the demo. One's called data stories. So many people say that a picture is worth 1,000 words in terms of visual analytics as a way to communicate to your audience the message. But what data stories is basically taking a visualization, processing the data into what's called natural language generation. And so being able to select a visualization and have it generate bullet points about that particular table of data, right? So insights are things like, well, what's the min and the max in the range? What's the average? What's the percentage change over time? What are some of the key drivers, or what are some of the dimensions that affect, the size or the volume of the data? And so I'll show a demo of data store. This was released around 2022.2, but now it's available in Tableau Server starting with 2023.1. So oftentimes Tableau will release features to things like Tableau Cloud, like our software as a service version, before we get it implemented in the server version. So data stories was all about natural language generation, right? How can you, as the analyst, essentially augment data with these auto-generated bullet points around the data? The data guide is really around augmenting information about the dashboard itself. So you can add things like the description of the dashboard. Each individual viz within the dashboard would be clickable. It's the description. It can provide the essentially the maybe an external URL to some documentation about the dashboard, what fields and what filters are in use for that visualization. Also, where we're kind of surfacing up some of what's called explain data, which is kind of a auto-generated statistics around outlier detection, ways of providing context to a dashboard. And as the analyst user, it's really important to provide that context so people don't the dashboard and not get confused or understand the insight. So I'll show that in the demo as well. All right, switching gears off of kind of some of the desktop features. Who uses Tableau Prep at all? Anybody familiar with that? Not a single person, one person. All right, two people. Okay, so Tableau Prep Builder. When we talked to our customers over the years, we found that some of the biggest challenges they face is cleaning and preparing data for analysis. And so we have lots of great partners in the space. Certainly Alteryx is probably one of the best in terms of just a robust kind of ETL self-service preparation product. But we really want to enable more people. And we knew that that was a gap in our products was around really cleaning, combining data and doing it in that very visual and direct kind of Tableau in the flow of analysis type of way. And so it's available to anybody who has a creator license for you to download and install. There's lots of great capabilities of it. If it's something of interest for the community, I do show up on some of your Tableau user groups that are hosted around quarterly. So maybe it might be a good opportunity for me to provide a Tableau Prep Builder workshop for anybody who's interested in kind of visual direct approach to analysis. But once again, Tableau Prep Builder, it's all about inputs, data transformations, and then ultimately outputs. Outputs being a data source in Hyper, right? Our proprietary data engine as a published data source. But we've also added capabilities to actually write back to certain databases as well as output as Excel workbooks or CSVs as well if you're trying to use Tableau to prepare the data, but then ultimately use maybe other tools for statistical packaging or whatever it might be in other products as well. All right, let's get into the Tableau server side as well. So a lot of these favorite way that, okay, these are the dashboards I use regularly. And rather than having to navigate into my various project folders to find my different dashboards, just favorite them. It'll show up on the homepage of your Tableau server, as well as there's a favorite section. So it's a great way to stay on top of your data. Next is subscriptions. Hopefully people have used subscriptions. It's a way to say that I want this dashboard delivered in my inbox on a regular basis. It's great for analysts as well. You built a dashboard that you expected the 20 people in your department to use the dashboard, but you don't always have control over how frequent they actually log in and consume the dashboards. So a subscription is a great way to make sure that those people are at least receiving a dashboard in their inbox on a scheduled basis. As well as some of the new features for subscription is things like I want to include a PDF version of the dashboard in the subscription of the email. And then there's also new capabilities around subscriptions to say, I want this dashboard delivered in my inbox when the extract refresh happens on the Tableau server. So making sure that my data got updated, I want to at that point in time generate the snapshot of the dashboard based on that extract refresh. Next is alerts. Alerts is basically a way to say that I have a numeric axis, some measure that I'm tracking over time maybe, and I want to know when that value crosses a certain threshold or is below a certain threshold. And I want to be notified when that value meets that condition or that target. So that's what alerts do. Next, metrics is a way to say that you have lots of dashboards that you're probably looking at and tracking different measures. Instead of navigating to 10 different dashboards, a metric is a way to track a value similar to like tracking a stock price on your phone. So instead of seeing a full dashboard, you're just seeing a quick snapshot of what the value is, maybe whether it's above or below a target, but always having that at your fingertips as a metric. Kind of see like those key performance indicator type of view there. All right. Next is content personalization. Similar, right? Kind of the end user capability of Tableau. The first one is customized views. Customized views is a way to say that when I log in to access my dashboard, I wish it would already have my filters preset to what I care about, right? So I use that a lot at Tableau. Certainly, they build us dashboards about the accounts that I work with, and I see, which of my accounts have technical support cases. But I really want it to be pre-filtered to my segment, my team, my customers. And instead of logging into a dashboard and then immediately having to change 20 different filters, you can preset those as a customized view. Next is view data customization. This really depends on your permissions, right? You can set permissions on which users have the ability to view the underlying data behind the dashboard. But what view data customization does is allows you to, one, select the fields that you want to be viewing, and you can read fields, and it can maintain that order when you maybe download the data if that's something that you have permission to access and do. Next is collections. I think of it like a playlist for Tableau dashboards. So, instead of favoriting all these dashboards, maybe you have a new team member and part of your onboarding, instead of sitting down, well, I would still sit down with them and train them. These are the dashboards we use and these are the data sources, but having almost like a curated set of dashboards and data sources that are really focused on their role, and then curating that as a collection of content is a great way to make things shareable in a way that's not based off of what project or folder they are in. Next is the personal space. This came out a while ago, but this idea of maybe I'm a desktop analyst and I want to publish a dashboard on Tableau server in my own private area, and I want to test the functionality of the dashboard in my personal area before I share it out to my broader community or audience. As well as it's really useful if you've ever created a dashboard and allowed for some web edit. Web edit is more that authoring experience in the browser. So you build a dashboard, somebody has new questions of the dashboard. Instead of going back to the analyst every time to ask every answer new questions, be able to create your own kind of personal copy of a dashboard with your own saved work, useful in the personal space. All right. Next feature area is around data source. So as a desktop user, you have the most control over what data you're connecting to, how you join the tables, whether it's live or extract. So a lot of that's done in Tableau Desktop. But we released a feature about being able to extract from the browser. I can imagine that the Tableau server has more compute power than your local laptop. And as a desktop user, when you choose to extract data, it's going to run the query and start importing that data into a hyper file on your local machine. So being able to do it from the browser is really useful. To say, I'm going to create this data connection, I'm going to make it a live connection, but then I'm going to put it on the browser, and then I'm going to extract from the browser and create a job on the back end of the server to run an extract. Next, edit published data sources. Who uses published data sources in terms of like sharing and governing data models for other business units? Okay, a few people, right? And I get that. Some dashboards are very use case specific to that particular dashboard. Other times, right, if you're more of a data steward role, you're focused on creating broader data models that can be used by many different people. And so what is every time you wanted to make a change to that data model, I want to add a new calculation, or I needed to add a new quick hierarchy in this data model, you used to always have to create a local copy in Tableau Desktop, make the change in desktop, republish and overwrite in the server. So now a lot of these quick, easy changes that you might make, I would certainly look towards the web environments for like web authoring, because you can do a lot of it now just directly over the web. Source administration is data freshness policy. So our customers, they have certainly some data that's a live connection to a database. Sometimes you have dashboards that really that real-time access to that particular data. I work with one customer that has a Tableau dashboard around financial aid. And so they're financial aid packagers. They're on the phone with students and they're looking at Tableau dashboards about all the related data points about their financial aid package. But if you're on the phone with a student, you certainly need to make sure that that is the most recent query coming from the database that's particular to that student. And so what data freshness policy is rather than training a user to always click the refresh button in the browser to make sure it's refreshing and running a query, really a way to use the caching of that workbook to that particular workbook level. Historically, Tableau Server works off of caching like a 12 hour is the default, meaning at any point in time when you access the dashboard, it may not be running a query, it may not be getting the most recent data, it's just getting a cached version of that dashboard. So connection using data freshness policy, you could say, well, make sure that if it's, every hour, I want to make sure that when I load that dashboard, it's going to execute a new query at least hourly. Or I want it to always set to always be live, meaning every time I go into that dashboard, make sure that it's issuing a query and getting me that live data back. So it's really great for those types of cases. All right. Next is areas around performance. Hopefully, as a desktop user, you kind of know that you're in the most level of responsibility in terms of the performance of the workbook. So much of your dashboard design decisions of the data connection, the number of joins, the live versus extracts, the number of marks, the number of filters, the number of data points, all of those things add up in terms of how complex the query is and the performance of your workbook. And so Tableau has a white paper. It's called Designing Efficient Workbooks. It is about 80 pages long. Nobody on my team wanted to rewrite it with new features because it's a very long white paper around all these little intricate details that affect the overall performance of workbook. So we released a feature called the Workbook Optimizer. Now it's not AI. It doesn't automatically make changes to your workbook. All it does is basically takes kind of like a pre-flight checklist of these are the things to consider that affect workbook performance. And it looks essentially at the XML of the workbook and says, okay, based off of this, there are a certain number of best practices that you've checked off in the designing of your workbook. Some that maybe you just change, but others you'll see what your past, which one might make sense to take action on. Next is a feature called view acceleration. So if you're familiar with Tableau, there's really two elements to loading the dashboard. There's the query, right? We're going to go to the database and run the query, and then the actual rendering of the marks in the visualization. So what acceleration does is it basically pre-computes queries on the back end. So think of Tableau Server running processes in the back end to pre-compute queries such that, for that particular view, you're likely to hit like a pre-warmed cache of that visualization or dashboard if you accelerate it, view acceleration. Feature, and actually it's not even really a feature, it's more like consider a marketplace of expanded capabilities of Tableau. It's called the Tableau Exchange. There's really three types of kind of resources or assets in the Tableau Exchange. The first one is called accelerators. Think of it as like pre-canned templates of certain types of dashboards that you can then map your data into. So I think of Salesforce. Salesforce has a pretty common CRM type of object model. So, rather than, using Tableau, which is pretty much a blank canvas, you connect to data, but it's a blank screen once you connect to those fields, being able to quickly map your fields into pre-designed dashboards. I think there's a lot of potential with the concept of accelerators, right? You can imagine that the higher ed community use a lot of the same data systems, you run a lot of the same types of analyses. So, if this becomes more community driven, right? I think of Tableau Public, right? It's kind of community driven, but being able to have, people were able to create Tableau dashboards that were de-identified, but then made it available in the that other community members could download a workbook and quickly swap out their data source and pre-designed dashboards is a really quick kind of fast time to value of going from zero to a dashboard very quickly based off of dashboard templates. Next is dashboard extensions. That's more like a JavaScript widget that you can bring in to your dashboard that does any number of different things that Tableau doesn't do natively. So a common one is things like write back. I want someone to be able to select data points in a dashboard and then have it run some sort of web form that writes back to a database. Those sort of actions that are outside of Tableau extensions come in. And then the last one is around connectors. So connectors is, you can imagine, right? The world of data is exploding. There's so many sources, new databases, new technology. Historically, team has been trying to keep up with the types of data connectors, Snowflake, Redshift, you name it. But there's just so many of them now that we're basically, it's more like an open API, being able to create connectors such that, via the exchange, a customer can go download a third-party connector where they've designed a connector that's designed to work natively with Tableau. Okay. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to take a quick look at maybe questions in the chat, and then I'll go in and demo some of the capabilities here.
Well, Coleman looks better. I'd just like to ask.
Any quick questions before I get in the demo? All right, let's go ahead and get into some of the demo. All right. I don't have a lapel mic, so I'm going to do my best to keep the mic where it is. So here I am. This is Tableau Cloud. It's just a software as a service version of Tableau Server. Certainly, Tableau Cloud, it's always up to date on the latest release. So if there are things in here that I know would not be in your Tableau Server, I'll tell you, because I know that you're probably operating on a little bit of an older version of Tableau, but pretty much everything that today certainly has been released by Tableau. Hopefully your user interface looks similar to this. Certainly you have things like the home page and your favorites. If you're not created a favorite, think about this dashboard. I could go ahead and just say, well, I want to add it to my favorites by starring it. And that's a quick, easy way as an end user to say, okay, I want my list of my favorite dashboards on the home page or in my favorite section on the web page. I'm going to go into this dashboard and we'll take a look at it. Nothing too exciting, particularly about this dashboard on the surface, right? I'm just looking at some generic higher ed data around degrees awarded by college, by different degree types like bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, etc. Certainly, as the end user consumer, you have a number of different features up here at the top. The first one I wanted to highlight is the data guide. So you'll see that here over on the right-hand side. What that does is it gives you some important context about that dashboard. So you can see when it was published, it gives you where you have your dashboard details is once again in the data guide is where the analyst can add these descriptions of various components of the dashboard. So if I click on this dashboard here, it's going to load in the essentially the caption of that particular piece of that worksheet within the dashboard. It tells you what data or what fields are being used in that visualization, what filters are being applied on that individual visualization. So things that may not be readily apparent about the dashboard, you can add those important contexts directly on the features there. The other kind of key component is this description is able to be read by screen readers. So if you're trying to design for accessibility for end users, it's a great way to make sure that as somebody essentially is using keyboard navigation, as it navigates the dashboard into the various kind of objects on the dashboard, as it navigates with the screen reader, it'll be able to provide that narrative there in that viz details. Now, certainly you've all probably have seen that, you have your various filters here up at the top. So as you make selections, your visualization updates. We mentioned the concept of customized views, meaning that I've set some filters on my dashboard, and every time I log in, I want this dashboard to be updated based off of when I go into access. So I'd say I want this to be my default, which would be, let's say that I'm the business school for 2022 is what I want to pre-filter my dashboard to. And so I could go in and save that as my default. So every time I log in, it pre-computes the filters that I care about when I log in. I can also make it visible to others, meaning, okay, I pre-filtered my data to my team's data, and I want to make that available to my team. I can use that and make that available to other people. The next kind of interesting component I wanted to cover is this idea of dynamic zone visibility. So I want to show information that might be in a layout container based off of the toggle of a parameter, right? So rather than loading up a dashboard of 20 different worksheets, you can have different layout containers in your dashboard and then choose to show and hide different levels of granularity. So in this case, I'm going to change that parameter, and I'm going to say that I want to go to the data story. So once again, what the data story does is it's looking at a visualization. In this case, my visualization is this degrees awarded about each individual college. And you can see auto-generating some insights. So the total number of degrees is 45,000 across 11 entities. So I can go into the configuration and change the to years, for example, or subcategories to college or program. I can change the narrative a little bit, but it's trying to call out individual pieces of insight around the years. But as I make a selection, for example, I want to look at business administration, it's rerunning that query, and now it's calling out information about, well, the marketing program had a lot of growth, or anything that you're basically taking the data values from my cross-tabular table, which is a lot of overwhelming data points, and then it's processing it into basically bullet points of what are some of the key insights, the min, the max, the range, the percentage change. Those are all things that you can do in a data story. But the interesting thing is, as a user makes a selection, it's passing the data values from the sheet and regenerating the story or those bullet points based off of the user selection. So that's what the data stories is. It's really about augmenting the analyst with bits of insight that you can then allow and provide to your end user consumers. The other thing that was interesting, I don't know if anybody noticed it, but when I select, for example, business administration, does anybody see what happens with the table down below? Somebody got it? Yeah, it expands a little bit. So basically what this dashboard does, and I'll go ahead and go into it. I'm just going to go into the web edit of the dashboard. What that's using is what's called a dashboard action, specifically that parameter action. So as a user, I go into dashboard actions, and I believe it's this one. What that's doing is saying, when a user selects on college, I want to take the value of college and pass it into the college parameter. So I selected business administration, it stores that value of that parameter. And then if we look at the details of, and maybe I don't know if it's in the data guide or my data details, but I'll just pull up the calculation really quick. I'm using what's called a major drill down function. What that does is it says that, if the value of college that I have on this visualization, if that matches the value that's been passed to that college parameter, then show me the major. Otherwise, just give it a blank string. So it's a way that I'm aggregating all of the other colleges up to its highest level. But when a user selects business administration from one worksheet, it takes that value, stores it, and then allows me to expand to that major. So that uneven drill down approach is something that a lot of our customers have kind of asked for. The Tableau hierarchy, expand the hierarchy from college to major, it expands to every single major. So being able to do it more dynamically of based on my user selection, only drill down based on the one that I selected. So that's an example of the dynamic, or excuse me, the parameter action capability. Okay. Other thing that I showed was this idea of I have my show and my hide. So you've probably have seen that we have a concept called layout containers. So in the object here, I have my layout container. You can see it if I select my container, right? So basically I have this container which contains my story and my text object. And what we're basically doing is saying, I want to show this based off of my value in this parameter. So if I have it being essentially false or no, then it's not showing it. And when I switch it to yes, you notice it expanded out of the layout container and the story. So when I hide it, you can see that it goes away. And when I say yes, it expands and shows that container. So that's that dynamic zone visibility. All right, what else do we have in this workbook? The next one is set actions. Once again, it's very similar to that parameter action concept of on this visualization, I want to select some data points. And when I make that selection of these data points that I might find interesting, I want it to take those data points, store it in what's set, and then use that set in a calculation. A common way of doing is this idea of what's in and out of the set. So how does the average compare of the selected students in this cohort compared to those students that are in that cohort? So it's a great way to do kind of that in and out, looking at the trend over time. And then you can see that trend over time, as well as I make that selection. In this case, I decided to change this and differentiate it based off of the new feature around the line patterns. And see what that trend is for those selected data points. If I go into this worksheet here, the only difference is, on my line chart, you'll see where it says path. And then path is where you would go in and choose that I want that particular line to be dashed or dotted. Okay. Does that set action concept make sense to everybody? The user makes a selection, stores those data values into that set, and then that actual set itself, let's see if I can find it here. That's the selected major. So I'll just go in and show that really quick. It's basically saying if the majors are in that set, and that set being driven by that action of users making that selection, capturing those values in the set, and then pulling up the total number of degrees for those selected values. Okay. All right, set actions, line patterns. Let's go into mapping. Okay, so once again, what I'm going to do is do a little bit of mapping. I have a data set that was open data. It's just geospatial objects. But in this case, right, I have a geospatial object called building. I can double click on my building, and Tableau creates a map for those building footprints. And then the next thing that I want to do is say, well, the building footprints are interesting, but I also have data about transportation, right? I have essentially bus routes. So I can drag this geometry, this geospatial object, and drag and drop it into what's called a map layer. So that's pretty cool. I'm basically going across two different data sources. I'm not doing data blending, which isn't very fun anymore. I would use those relationships in the data model before I go with data blending. But the idea is I'm bringing queries to two different data sources and overlaying spatial objects on the map. So I have my various buildings. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit here. Yeah, we'll go in here a little bit. All right, so I have my buildings. Maybe I might want my buildings to be a certain color. I'll make those orange. I got my bus routes in blue, and I have maybe my bus stops that I want to add as a layer. And maybe I'll make those, I don't know, some other color. Let's go red or green. I can't see what's better. But to see how that's working is basically I'm creating multiple map layers just by dragging and dropping different geometries. And then I should also have a kind of a map layer toggle as well. And so you can show that to your end user of saying, well, you can toggle on and off which layers you care about. Maybe I don't care about bus stops or routes. And so I have my normal map and I can turn it on and off those different map layers as well. So lots of new capabilities for those that do kind of geospatial analysis beyond your standard, zip codes or states and those types of things, being able to do a lot more with geospatial objects. Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight in the demo is the concept of the image role. So let me go ahead and I'll turn it off first. And all right, so basically I have a data set. Think of it as having, the number of total enrolled students by state. And that's great. You can have but maybe I want to make my dashboard more interesting with something like, in this case, state flags. And so I have a data set that has the state and a hosted image. It's just a URL of where that PNG object is stored, right? So likely, if you have your team members, likely have an image stored somewhere on an ASU server for their particular image, and maybe you want their little profile picture next to their name in a dashboard. All you're doing is you're taking a field that has a URL that's a PNG, a JPEG. There's some other photo types, but what we're doing is we're just going in and saying I want to switch this to an image role for URL. And so now it's basically bringing a image in to the header of that visualization. So, hosted images of logos of peer institutions or, logos of, the most common employers of students that graduate ASU, right? You might have hosted images of those types of things and be able to bring those onto a visualization. The last one, hopefully you've seen kind of this idea of the swap measure, right? I have total number of applicants, maybe I have total enrollment. As I make that selection, you'll notice that in this enrollment, on the axis itself, I can go in, choose edit axes, and then based off of the title, I want to basically pass in the value of the selected metric in my title. So when I switch from applications to enrollment, you'll just see how down at the bottom, the axes updates with the title from that selected metric. Unfortunately, the one thing it didn't do is the ability to swap the format, right? So I have basically integers for a total enrolled. When I click on yield, it doesn't update to a percentage. That's the next thing I would like to see out of that swap, is going from whole numbers to percentages. But that ability to quickly kind of add the context on the axes when a user makes a selection to a selected metric. If everybody hasn't seen the concept of select metric, let me go in and find it here. Where did it go? Well, let's see if I can edit it from here. I'll search for it. One quick tip. I click here. I'll look for calculations. That should tell me where it is. Here it is. Right click, choose edit, right? So for those of you that haven't done that measure swap before, it's basically saying if the selected metric is equal to some value in the parameter, show a certain metric. So if my parameter is equal to A, which A in this case is displayed as applications, then I want to measure sum of the number of students applied. Else, if the parameter is equal to B, which is the total number of students enrolled, then I want to show the measure of sum of the enrolled. And so that's the way that I created that quick calculation there. Okay. And so let's imagine that I've created my workbook. The last thing I might do is basically run the optimizer. So again, the optimizer does, so when I rerun it, it basically is trying to go through a list of common best practices. So things that I might take action on is, let's see, unused fields. So that's common, right? You connect to a data source, might have hundreds of fields. And so, having those fields in the data model may not be a big deal, but you might want to, if you're taking an extract, you might say, well, I want to hide all unused fields. Then I extract the data. So it's only importing just the fields that I need for that dashboard. Than it running a query and import hundreds of fields data model, which takes time to run that extract. Hiding the unused fields is a way to speed up the processing of the extract. Example. There's two other things that's kind of giving me a warning on. Okay, it contains a lot of data sources. Yeah, not that big a deal, likely. But generally, trying to look at how you can consolidate the size of the workbook, as well as you can see with the things that it passed as well. Number of views in a dashboard, right? I purposely kept things pretty simple. But if you had 20 different worksheets in a dashboard, it's probably going to tell you that that doesn't really follow maybe the best practices there. Okay, so I ran the optimizer. I can go ahead and click publish. And then once again, this is the ability to publish to my personal space. So we'll just call this the ASU on the fly. And so basically, I'm able to put that into my personal space, so it's private to just me, right? So I'm ad hoc in the web authoring. I made some changes to this dashboard. I built a couple visualizations, and then I saved it into my personal space. Yep, I know I got 8 minutes left, so I'll go ahead and wrap up here. But hopefully that was helpful in terms of just there's a lot of innovation that comes to Tableau over the years. Analyst, right? You're familiar with collecting the data, building visualizations, building dashboards, but there's really a lot of innovation that comes. And so if you go on our website, tableau.com/products, all features, it has kind of a rolling list of a lot of the new capabilities that have come out in Tableau over the years. So I highly recommend that, because sometimes I get customers on the phone and say, oh, I'm trying to do this. It's like, oh, what version are you on? Because we now have that feature available. With that, I will stop. I think I got one question in the room so far. Okay, then I will wrap up here, and I'll take a quick look at any questions online. Hopefully this was helpful for everybody. Q&A, we're good.